Well, it's Friday night, evidence-based triathlete, which Ted and I have often considered renaming Two Guys Talking Triathlon.
Well, tonight is three guys talking triathlon.
That's right. So we decided to do a little bit of a twist and invite Rick Simpson on as our guest. You know, the funny thing is here in Las Vegas, we have such a wonderful endurance community, not only of athletes, but we've got a lot of expertise in our area. And what we are going to do is start inviting some of those experts locally on and chatting with them. And so we're kicking that theme off with Rick Simpson tonight. And Rick is obviously a high-powered age group athlete, and we can get into that a little bit. But not only is he just a really high-level athlete, he's really well read in the sports science area of triathlon. And I appreciate the activity on Facebook. You offer a lot of great information, and it's neat to have you on this talk. So thanks for joining us, Rick.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, one of the things that we were going to talk about tonight is about swimming, and Rick is always willing to lend some thoughts about swimming. And many times we've talked about my swimming issues on this podcast, and my shoulder issues, and some of Rick has always been giving me like little pieces of advice through our Facebook page, and I've taken them to heart. Anytime someone gives me advice, I look at it and I evaluate it, and his stuff seems like it's relatively spot on. And subsequently, my shoulder's starting to feel a little bit better. I'm not swimming any faster. I'm just letting you know that. but hey, if I can do more volume, hopefully the speed will come if I'm not dealing with shoulder pain all the time. So I want to thank you for that. And part of that is this part of this talk was brought up by that. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm certainly glad that something that I said seemed to help. It just,
Yeah.
The way I look at it is that if I can help someone get a little bit better, then that's a good thing. We have a population in this country that's 70% overweight or obese, maybe more than that by now, and not everybody's going to be Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky. And so we all need to find out, we need to be satisfied with where we are and, get the best out of ourselves, but satisfied where we are but still continually trying to improve.
Absolutely. And I think, if you think about most triathletes, that's what we want. That's all we want is we want to, number one, be healthy, be happy. And in the triathlon world, try and improve, right? And then John and I have talked about this a lot of times. As we get older, try not to slow down as well.
Okay.
All right. So what I really wanted to talk to you about tonight was obviously more about swimming, and I know you're well read in many areas, and but we decided to talk about swimming tonight. So the first question I have for you is, how do you approach swimming differently from being a triathlete to a pool swimmer? Because I think that one of the things that you see in a lot of forums and you see in a lot of conversations is, if you want to be good in triathlon swimming, go join a master's swim group. And to me, that doesn't always resonate. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the problems that we have in U.S. swimming is that most of the other modern countries in the world have have in their national budgets budget for athletics, where they go and do testing on swimmers, bikers, runners. Those would be the three that we're concerned with, and the U.S. has little or none of that. We've got a big population, so we have a lot of people, and there is a tendency, though, not from the coaches that I've seen around here, though I haven't seen a lot of them, but there is a tendency to do what I was told is the 1,000 rat theory. And that theory states, you take 1,000 rats and you send them across the alley, and one bites the cat, and that's the rat you want. And then you want to take another 1,000 rats and send them across the alley, and one bites a cat, and now you've got 2 rats. And you can develop yourself a real good team that way, but that you're not making a lot of progress with the other 999.
Right.
And sometimes master swimming, and I don't know much about master swimming around here, but I know in other areas, sometimes master swimming is get in the water and crank out the yards.
Yeah.
And there's not much in terms of technique. How do I make this easier? What am I doing wrong? This sort of thing.
Well, and I also,
again, I don't, I think that's probably a reason why it doesn't resonate. And again, I know nothing about masters.
Yeah.
I've not swum in a master's program around here. As far as I know, Devaney runs a master's program. As far as I know, Devaney does a terrific job.
Yep.
She's running that 100 hundreds this weekend. She's very tuned into technique.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to, and I don't mean to say one person or another. I'm saying more nationally. I read about
and
this.
that's why I want to make it clear that's the way that I'm speaking.
Yeah,
More
perfect.
national.
You should. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great clarification, because we do have some good swimming coaches here, and Devaney specifically is really top notch, and that's also a good group. And there's a variety of not only swimmers in there, but triathletes. But it is an interesting discussion that Ted and I have had on, college swimming, and then transitioning college swimming and that competitive swimming to open water swimming. And college swimming, when I swam in college, it's a lot of short swims, varying sets, but the longest event in a college swim meet is 1650. So it's it's not a 2.4 mile swim, or even if anyone does open water swimming for like 10K swims, that's a totally different way to prepare.
And I guess that's what I was getting at is many of the what I've read, and it's more what I've read that people talk about with the masters groups, is it's more geared towards that ex-college swimmer that still wants to go and do 200s and 50s and that kind of thing. And many triathletes gravitate towards that because it's a group, but it may not be in their best interest to do so. And once again, I'm not asking for any particulars on things, just what you've heard and what you've seen nationally.
Well, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, but in my opinion, I think you can take a set of 100s and you can make it you can put a distance component on it by saying, we're going to do 2100s, and we're going to do them on 10 seconds rest.
Yep.
And nonstop. Or we can say we're going to do 2100s and we're going to do them on the 2 minutes, and everybody's going to have 30 or 40 seconds rest.
Yep.
The first one is obviously way more distance oriented. Yep. And the second one is way more, fast twitch, more, 100, 200 yard race oriented. So, you can write those, and the amount of rest will dictate whether it's really a distance program or not.
And I would question, is it the amount of rest, or is it the speed with which you are asking someone to swim? Right.
Because, well, if you're gonna go at 10 seconds rest, there's a ceiling as to how fast you can go.
Well,
you can't recover enough.
Yes and no, right? I can go at a very slow pace and then take 10 seconds rest. Right. If I'm like zone 1, I say heart rate zone 1 and 10 seconds rest, or if I'm zone 5 and 10 seconds rest, those are two different.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to find any zone 1 master's programs.
Well, it's actually really interesting. I spent some time this winter in Tucson, and we got into it with a master's group there. And the coach actually was a former Olympian. And
Mhm.
he was very aware of that stuff and be like, okay, we're going to do these hundreds, but it's aerobic pace. And it was still short rest, but it was
Mhm.
particular for going a little bit longer. It's like, listen, like if you
Mhm.
go really hard on these, you're not going to have good quality in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 100
Right.
on 10 seconds rest.
Yeah.
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 And I think
Well,
it's important.
let's go down that path because I think that's an interesting path to pursue, as opposed to getting into, where you do it and who you do it with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's talk about progression of swimming when you're trying to target a 1.2 mile swim or 2.4 mile swim, how you go about doing that. And if we want to put it in a context of, competing, high school, collegiate swimming and that I think that's fine. But how Rick, maybe talk a little bit about how to approach training for a half Ironman or full Ironman.
Well, basically, and I can get into how far I think you ought to be able to swim, but basically what I try to do is that, I have what I call hard days, and they're, maximum aerobic heart rate or above as I get closer to the race days. And then I have what would be zone 2 days.
Mhm.
And I wear a polar heart rate monitor, and I have to wear a shirt, otherwise the strap will slide down every time I push off the wall. But I wear a polar heart rate monitor and periodically check and make sure that I'm where I need to be
Mhm.
from a heart rate perspective. Otherwise, it's just so easy for me to overtrain in swimming, and swimming is hard. You have to hold your breath.
Yep.
And then you have to hold your breath on turns even more. It's difficult.
Sorry, I got up. I didn't mean to be rude, but I was looking for my goggles that have the heart rate monitor on the temple now. So I don't know if you've seen
Yeah,
that, but yeah, that works
Warm.
actually really well.
Yeah, yeah. I happen to have a polar,
Mhm.
and and I have an old shirt, so
Yeah.
that's better than spending $150 to
No,
Yeah,
but
yours is probably, I have no doubts yours is probably considerably better than mine, but mine works.
I think you're spot on with the it's easy to overswim, right? It's easy to do when we go back to those hundreds, right? It's easy to go in zone 4, zone 5, take 30 seconds break,
All
do
the
it
time.
again, do it again. And that's like the traditional sprinter mentality, short distance mentality, not a long distance mentality.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, the hardest thing for me and the reason I wear a heart rate monitor is the hardest thing for me is to go slow enough on my easy days to get my heart rate down to where I really want it.
Yeah.
It's harder to do that on either that in swimming than it is in biking or running.
Yeah, I agreed, because getting heart rate in swimming is difficult, but it's interesting, right? You've listened to a lot of our podcasts. How many times have John and I mentioned the importance of going slow and keeping your heart rate in control in biking and running? And I don't think we've ever mentioned it in swimming.
No, very few people.
Till you mentioned it. So I think that's great.
Yeah, very few people are measuring heart rate during swimming.
Well, there's no power meters,
Yeah.
there's no power meters to use. There's no, I guess they've come up with some shoe power meters now for running.
Yep.
And of course, power meters have been around in cycling and for a very long time. I like heart rate because I can use it across all 3 disciplines. And on race day, if it's a real hot day, my heart rate will reflect what's going on in my body, as opposed to like a power meter, I expect to do this many watts. Well, if it's real hot, that's not going to happen, or if it does happen, I'll pay for it big time in the run.
Yep.
So, which is why I like, and I know a lot of people use different things, but that's why I like to use the heart rate monitor. I can use it across all 3 disciplines. I can and it works well in the race.
Well, you're
So-
inspiring me to break out my heart rate monitor for swimming. I just don't, I just have not gotten into the habit of doing that. So that's good to hear.
Now there's not a lot of heart rate monitors that you can actually read your heart rate in the pool.
Hmm.
The last time I checked with Polar, and then it's more than a year ago, but Polar only had like 3 models
Hmm.
that did that. But they've been doing that for a long time, because the particular heart rate monitor that I have, I got back in 2004, I think.
Hmm.
So it's really quite old, but it
works.
works good. So
The Form goggles has sort of changed things technology-wise for swimming. We're not sponsored by Form, but
Not yet.
no.
they are the heads-up display, and if you put the heart rate monitor on the temple, it will actually show your heart rate in real time while you're swimming.
And that might be a real advantage. It's really easy to get real excited at the beginning of a triathlon and go out there and spill way too much.
Yeah.
And that might be a real good way to keep a lid on that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that, because think about it. You would never start the run and be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spike my heart rate for 2 minutes and then go run another 13 miles, right?
Right.
It's not a good strategy.
No.
But we do it. We do it and we don't even know it.
That's pretty well universally accepted.
Yeah. There's no evidence-based triathlon there. That's just universally accepted. Exactly. So that being said, when you think about your swimming and you think about the amount of time, for example, is it polarized like an 80-20 with your zone 2 versus your more interval work, or?
That's what I do, but I don't necessarily advocate that. And the reason that I say that is that people do real well on different, when you start a program with a group of individuals, you really have no idea which ones are going to do well in a particular program and which ones not. And you only put them through the program. People will bet more. And it's my best guess that at least some of that has to do with recovery. If you're not recovered enough, you can get in that really good quality day that you need to get in, that 3200s or whatever that you get in on that particular long aerobic pace that you're going to get in. So I think that there has to be some effort to determine how quickly you recover. If you recover, I think the very top level athletes, I think that they recover really fast. That's just my best guess. And I think that most of us don't recover that fast. And that could explain why some people do well in a program, like for instance, Brett Sutton's program. He's had some very successful athletes, has the stuff that I've seen he appears to be going on 4 days pretty hard and then 1 day of recovery. Where he goes easy. Well, if you can survive that, you're going to apparently be pretty good, because he's had some pretty good athletes over the years, and he's brought people along and made them a lot better than they should be. But there have been other athletes that have just they've ended up injured. They can't they just can't handle it. And I think that has to do with, and good athletes. Ted, didn't Angela Nath go over there and train with Brett for a while and then got injured and didn't?
I don't know who she's working with, but obviously she's struggled with injuries throughout her career. And
this was like before Chucky V and Mark Allen and before all those people. That was one of the steps. and I'm not absolutely positive, but it would make sense with her because she's always struggled with injuries, which is a form of I won't call it overtraining, but I will call it incomplete recovery.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, no, and we've talked about this before on our podcast. You know, there are now genetic markers for collagen synthesis, right? And and tendon rebuilding, basically, and there are differences in people, right? And I think you're 100% correct that the highest level pros, for the most part, I would be really willing to bet that they have the genetic anomalies to actually do that, because the loads that some of these people put on themselves are impossible unless they were recovering really, really well. And that's a hallmark of an elite athlete. And we see that not just in triathlon, we see that in hockey, we see that in basketball, we see that in all of the sports. It's the people that can put in more work day after day after day without getting injured that end up being the elite. And to add to that, if you're not one of those people, you can't train like those people.
And I was just going to add that in because those are the two rats that Rick started, with that story. You can't do what those two rats do. And so we can't take what some of these pro triathletes are doing, where they're doing 7 Ironman in a year or whatever the number is. That is just
and some of these athletes could be very good athletes on better recovery. I suspect that Angela's one of them. That's just my opinion, but I expect that, she's so motivated and wants to do so well that she's driven herself into, she sees harder work as the answer, and harder work is the answer as long as the recovery is adequate.
Well, and that issue is really an age group issue. I mean,
I don't want to pick on Angela. I like Angela. I think that she's done a lot with, I think she's done a lot in triathlon. I remember when she won 4 6 halves one summer and just, was on this massive tear.
Yep.
No, but I don't think you're picking on her. I think that you're bringing up a very valid point that age groupers especially need to recognize, is that doing more, going harder is not always the answer. And that we would actually probably, a lot of us, myself included, would benefit from more adequate recovery. And, and even on a recovery day, actually recovering, not that's my day to do all this stuff in my life. I got to run all these errands and I got to do this. And my wife wants to go hiking. So it's my off day. So I'll go hiking for a couple hours. That's not recovery. And understanding, that. And the problem is, other than like HRV, which is still a little pseudoscience, we don't have a good metric for recovery.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I got a Momentous who has PR lotion now. They also sell collagen. They talk about some research that has been, I've got some too, but they've got some research, or they cite some research that says that collagen peptides taken with vitamin C are better at producing connective tissue than either one alone. Vitamin C is used for connective tissue. The Limeys figured that out a long time ago.
Yeah, and and the protocol is pretty interesting with that. So it's 15 grams of collagen and 500 milligrams of vitamin C taken before exercise. And
most research protocols, and I did a little research on adenosine when I was 35, 40, that area. Anyway, most of that stuff works better beforehand, like the PR lotion. It's the same thing. The PR lotion works better if you apply it. It'll help afterwards as well, but it works better if you do it before you train.
No, I've been an advocate for years with the collagen pre-training. And even I'll do it like on a long bike ride, I'll put it in my first bottle. Like if I'm going to go 4 or 5 hours, just, it doesn't have to necessarily be before, because it's a long time I'm going to be out there. Put 15 grams in my first bottle, and, and with the vitamin C, you can buy compounds now that actually have it already mixed in at the proper ratio, or just, have 500 milligram vitamin C pill, or go out and actually, I don't know, have real food.
Yeah.
But it's actually hard to ingest real food collagen, right? Like you almost have to supplement with it. I mean, you can only eat so many tendons, and
well, and then the other thing is that many of these collagens are collagen peptides, which means they've already been partially broken down.
Yeah.
Which means your stomach has to do less. And there's a whole thing in medicine now that as you get older, all your organs go down in function. And the one to be concerned about is the pancreas,
right?
Because the pancreas secretes enzymes to break down food. The enzymes are both carbohydrates and proteins. And, they secrete this much for carbohydrates, and that much, I can't.
Yeah, no, you're good. We got it. A big amount.
A big amount for proteins. Proteins are much harder to break down.
Yep.
And some people even feel that some of the muscle loss due to aging is related to that lack of pancreatic enzymes.
Yeah, and so collagen obviously, is just a mixture of certain amino acids, right? And glycine, high, mostly glycine, I think. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Like having it broken down definitely does help. I'm also a proponent of utilizing just a essential amino acid blend as well. For that very reason, you're because you're spot on. It's the protease enzymes in the pancreas that downregulate as we get older. And one of the things that I encourage people to do with their blood tests, and we've talked about having blood tests as endurance athletes before, is to actually look at your blood protein levels, and especially as you age. And it's amazing that they go down. Well, not amazing, they go down, and we need to do more to keep it up, especially if we're going to try and recover.
Yep. Yeah. And that's all part of recovery, right? The damage level is the same on the muscle. If you go 10% harder, you get so much additional damage. And, if you don't have the tools to fix that damage and repair it back to what it was, and the body is a wonderful machine to where it repairs back better. But if you don't have the ingredients to do that, it's not going to happen.
So I love this discussion, and it's interesting. The question posed was, how do you approach training for 1.2 or 2.4 mile swim? And what each of you have done is you've highlighted how important it is to recover from training and to have the right nutrition in order to do the right training. And so I really love how you both sort of zeroed in on that. And I think that's a really good take-home message. But now let me circle back to some of the swimming part and ask you, what about time spent in the pool for technique versus volume versus intensity, again, with the context that we're training for a half Ironman or a full Ironman?
Well, depending on, first of all, let me talk about how far I think you ought to swim. I think that, first of all, I think that if you're swimming less than 3 days a week, you're missing some. If you're only swimming 2 days a week, you're missing some opportunities to improve. Mm-hmm. That third day is a 50% increase over 2, and it's a real opportunity to improve. At least one of those 3 days is going to be a relatively hard day. And that means you'll check your technique, but you're not going to be doing specific technique sets, except maybe in the warm up or cool down. But your hard stuff should be hard. That you got to get in shape. If you do depending on how much hard work you do, you might have 2 hard days. Well, if you had that 3rd day, you could spend that whole 3rd day working on technique.
Mm.
Now, I think if you are going to swim a half Ironman, I think, and I'm going to assume that one of those 3 days is going to be a quote unquote long day. I think that at the very absolute minimum, your long day should be as long as your event, which means if you're doing an Ironman, you need to be swimming like 4,300 yards.
Right.
Better 50% more.
Mm.
So, and that could be 1 day a week, that could be more than 1 day a week, that could, it just, but I think the minimum is you don't want to show up at the starting line wondering that you've never done 2,100 yards before
Mhm.
and wondering if you can get through the swim. You don't want to be that person.
Mhm.
It's unsafe. The most deaths in triathlon are in swimming. Somebody gets real excited, has a propensity for an unknown heart problem, is not ready for that kind of distance and gets in the water, and bad things have happened.
Mhm.
I think that you should be, better to do all 3 days at least your race distance. But once you start getting up, there are time constraints on all this stuff. I'm retired, so I don't have as much in terms of time constraints. But you ought to be doing, even if you're doing an Ironman, you ought to be able to swim. You ought to be swimming that distance in your workout. Now that's everything: you warm up, race, warm up, hard set, and cool down. You ought to be swimming at least 4,300 yards on your long day.
Mhm.
For Ironman. That's just my opinion. It takes all the question of, can I do this swim? It takes it right out of there. You're doing it every day.
Mhm. So then I like that. So 1 day is a hard day, 1 day is a technique focused day, and 1 day is a long day. Maybe, because you've been good with posting comments about swim technique, maybe go through some of the critical parts that someone should focus in on technique.
Okay. There are 3 P's. There is position, there is propulsion, and there is power.
Mhm.
Now, position is where you get yourself right flat on top of the water, and that is, you're kind of in a proud position. When you do a chin up, when you're hanging from the bar, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to arch your back just a little bit and pull up.
Mhm.
And the reason you do that is you're just a little bit stronger that way. Well, you should kind of do that when you swim. You should just kind of be, some coaches describe it as being proud, a proud stance, in running, they talk about the same thing, proud stance, and the same thing in the water is kind of be proud. But if you're relatively flat, close to the surface of the water, you're going to create the least resistance possible. Now, no matter what you do with your arms, you're going to create less resistance than the guy with his hips hanging way down low, his hips and his feet. And in conjunction with that, there is the 3 H's: the heels, the hips, and the top of the head. Those need to be right at the water surface. Now that's all position.
Mhm.
Propulsion is swimming with the hand and the forearm instead of the hand and the elbow going back before the hand, so that you're using that whole forearm surface and hand surface to get a hold of the water, because water is really slippery. It'll slide around everything. And so the more surface area you get in there to try to grab the water with, the more you're going to be able to hold that water. And you can't just, and Lionel Sanders admits that he's tried to do this, you can't just try to put your hand in and rip the water apart.
Right.
Because if you do that, water's just going to go all around your hand and your arm, and you're not going to go all that fast. You'll generate tons of power, but you're not going to develop much speed. And being able to get a hold of, being flat on top of the water and being able to get a hold of that water and hang on to it, which that's another thing. If you see people swimming now, they'll have their hand like this. Well, their hand needs to be flat. It increases the surface area. And if it's like this, that top there, you don't want that. That makes the hand hydrodynamic. You don't want your hand to be hydrodynamic. You want your hand to create as much resistance as possible. So you have to feel for the water, and you get a better feel for the water when you use paddles. You don't slip through the water so much, but then when you take the paddles off, you have to try to duplicate that to where you're not slipping. If you just take the paddles off and just move your arms and don't think about it, then you're not grabbing, the chances are you're not going to grab a hold of very much water. So, and then the last one is power, and that's the hard one. It takes a lot of, you have to develop very specific muscle strength that is balanced. If it's not balanced, you can be very strong, but not fast. When I was in college, we saw this all the time. Every once in a while, the gymnasts would come in, and they were strong as bulls. I mean, they could do iron crosses and, upper body strength. That, forget about it. You got to speed, but they couldn't swim fast. Right? They didn't have the feel for the water. They didn't. They had plenty of power, but they didn't have that position in the water, and they didn't have the right, feel for the water to get the propulsion. It's the reason a good 12-year-old can beat a 25-year-old who's never swam, or who swam very little. 12-year-olds. I mean, a lot of these kids are going 6,000-7,000 yards a night, five, sometimes 6 nights a week, and they'll just destroy a 25-year-old who's going 2,000 or 3,000 yards, 2 or 3 times a week. And you look at them, they're not as strong, but they're fast.
They certainly make it look easy too. And that's, flying by.
Yes, they do.
It's like, to be young like that, that's great. Well, this is really good information. And it's interesting you did not mention kicking at all.
Kicking is a little bit different. Okay. We have 2 diametrically opposed kickers in our household. My wife can kick, I don't know if she can still do it, but she used to be able to kick, to go 100 in 2 minutes kicking was like, that wasn't too hard for her, And the best kicker I ever heard of was an Australian swimmer. Now, this was a 50-meter pool, and she was over 6 foot tall, she had big hands and big feet, but she could kick 100 meters with a kickboard. Her best time was 1:07.
Wow.
That's pretty fast. That's pretty fast.
Yep.
Now, people like that, you would encourage them to use their feet,
That's right. There's some propulsion there.
And you want to have those heels up high, because you want the feet, you want the hips and the legs and the feet to draft behind the shoulders so that you don't create as much drag. So there is, and if you're a good floater, you can get away with kicking less. I'm not a good floater. I do a steady 6 speed all the time. I'm not a real good kicker, but I need the kick to balance my stroke and to keep my hips and heels up near the surface. Shoot, there's a lot there. There was, back when I was a swimmer in the late 60s and 70s, There's a lot of talk about, well, Shane Gold was during that time, I think. Anyway, she was there. There were some 2-beat Australian kickers that were really fast, and they floated real well. And that's why why you could do a 2-beat kick. And even then, everybody said that. Just, if you're not a good floater, don't, there's no doing a 2-beat kick is not that beneficial. In fact, it's not beneficial at all unless you can keep those legs up and out of the way. Now, we do have an advantage in triathlon in that all the races in North America, with the exception of Cozumel, are wetsuit races. I don't know of any race that's non-wetsuit. And I might have missed one, but certainly most of the races are wetsuit races, and that allows us to float our legs and our hips up higher and create less resistance.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead.
So I love this conversation, and I want to ask another technical question. So in regard to distance per stroke or stroke rate, do you think about those things? And what, and what merits do you put on both of those things?
Distance per stroke and stroke rate are both specific to you. I'm 5'7". I think Phelps is 6'4", 6'2", something like that. He's got a gigantic wingspan. One stroke he's going to take farther in one stroke than I am. And it's just, and there's no, he can be out of the water for 30 years. Just because of his anatomy, he's going to be able to stroke farther. So, but counting your strokes is important. It is a way to tell whether or not you're grabbing hold of the water. Once you push off the wall, if you're a beginning swimmer, once you push off the wall, the first 2 or 3 strokes, provided you get in a good position pushing off the wall, your first 2 or 3 strokes are pretty good. And then things start falling apart. And then you get to the wall, and you turn around. And if you're tenacious about it, you get to do that again, where you get 3 or 4 good strokes, and then things start falling apart. Well, if you're a distance swimmer, even if you're somebody like Erica Sullivan over at Sandpipers, when they asked the sportscasters, they were trying to get a rise out of her. I think they said, what were you thinking when you went past those other swimmers when she swam herself into the silver medal? And she says, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just counting my strokes, which is apparently something that she does so that her technique doesn't fall apart. That would be the advantage of counting, over a specific distance like that, 50 meters, count your strokes. You're not falling apart if your stroke count is the same. Stroke rate, I'm not again, that would be, there's a lot of variables there. How much power the athlete produces, how long their stroke is. I mean, you can do a real fast stroke rate if your stroke is 6 inches long, but I think stroke count is a better way to check efficiency than stroke rate. Obviously, if you have the same stroke count but a higher stroke rate, you will go faster.
Yeah. Well, we'd all like to have an unlimited stroke count and an unlimited stroke rate, right? But
yes,
it's the same thing in running. We're talking about stride length and stride frequency.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I've read some stuff from some coaches that say, okay, well, you got to get your distance per stroke good first, right? And then you can build your rate. And then I've read other people say, no, rate is more important and distance per stroke will come later. And it's, for someone like me that's an aspiring swimmer, it's hard to to kind of figure that out?
I would, I think, and stroke rate is like beyond technique. Stroke rate is a way to check to see how you're doing with your technique. Erica Sullivan could tell whether she was falling apart or not. I'm guessing, but it's a good reason to do it. Whether her stroke is falling apart or not, just by checking what her stroke count was. And you don't have to do it all the time. You just, you're in the middle of a workout or towards the end of a set or something like that, and you know what your stroke count was on the first length, and so on the last two, you take your stroke count on your last length and, oh, gee, maybe I'm falling apart here. What am I doing? Then the next thing is, okay, what am I doing wrong? How do I fix this?
And I think that's where I'm at right now. Just, and this is more personal, is when I get tired, like everyone, my stroke rate or stroke count increases. Right?
Right. You're slipping through the water.
Yeah, I'm slipping through the water. I know I'm getting fatigued. I can feel like my arms are getting tired, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I can't get is, how do I fix that other than just more yardage? But if it's probably, but I'm tired and my technique is not as good, more rest. Is that the answer? I mean, I'm asking because I really genuinely am struggling with this.
Well, the problem is that, the swim that you have to do in a race is a distance swim.
Yep.
It's not like you're going to swim 200 yards. And so, if we're doing 200s, we'll take more rest because, we're still going as far as you would go in the race. So that's a problem, is you can't. If you take more rest, you're going to sacrifice some endurance. Yep. Sometimes that's necessary in order for you to make progress. Sometimes you're better off to just try to hold it together, 3 or 4 strokes off of every wall and just push off of more walls. So I don't think that there's a blanket answer there. The way I would approach it would be push off more walls. That's the way, personally, I would approach something like that is to push off more walls and then have more total strokes that are good strokes.
Yeah. That's interesting because that's actually one of the first things I thought of is when I get tired, I pop up out of the water sooner rather than concentrating on that good push off on the wall and then starting with a good clean stroke.
Yeah, I think one thing that, it's a little hard to show here, but I think I can, is that if you do this, where your biceps are touching the back of your ears and your hands, let me see here, your hands are overlapping.
Yeah.
And your thumb locks them in place so that you can really squeeze tight. What you're doing is you're making your shoulders narrower so that you can spear through the water better. One of the side effects of that is that you tend to rise, instead of rising up this way to go to the surface. If you lift your head, that's what you will do. You will tend to rise up that way to the surface. Mm-hmm. And this is preferable because now you have that good position on top of the water.
I love the fact we're talking about walls, and because I've had many swim coaches tell me, oh, you need to make sure you have this good streamlined position off the wall and push hard off the wall and don't breathe into the wall. And I always respond, well, when there's walls in triathlon, I'll worry about the walls, but I could care less about the walls because there's no walls in triathlon. But it seems to me like maybe there is a place for this where I can actually reset my technique and think about that. And I really, I think this is very good, very insightful.
Yeah.
Every wall is an opportunity to set yourself up, stroke wise. And some people, especially initially, are better off to be doing grab turns because they'll have a more consistent push off and get in a more consistent good position than they are to do flip turns. Now it's cooler to do flip turns. Everybody knows that, but certainly for the beginning swimmer, or the swimmer without a ton of experience, or the swimmer who's just, working on their stroke. Maybe it's their easy day and they're working on their stroke. Maybe you ought to do grab turns so that you get consistent push-offs to the wall every time and reach that good position in the water where you can get 3 or 4 good strokes and then things start falling apart a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, what I always focus when I do get tired on where I'm coming up out of my turn relative to the flags. And sometimes I notice that I'm popping up way too soon, and I'm like, okay, I need to just focus.
Yeah.
Because you're right.
I gotta fix that here.
That's right. If you can't start that length well, then it's so hard to start swimming from a stop position. And so if you're not pushing off the wall well, then your middle part of that length is going to be really challenging. Okay, hold on. We got a couple of questions in chat that we need to get to. Okay, going back to the discussion on some of the blood markers, Ted, what blood marker parameter were you talking about?
These are actually genetic. So, and I don't have the genes in front of me.
Isn't there a total protein?
Well, oh yeah. So yeah, total protein. I thought we were talking about the collagen. Is it more the collagen, the synthesis genes, or is just blood protein? I think for a blood marker, blood protein. Yeah. And then if you really want to get crazy, I mean, you could do markers, but it's through stool samples, and you can actually measure your protease enzymes and stuff like that too.
Okay.
If
all right, good. All right, so then the other question here, back to the swimming technique, is what causes stroke per length to be more variable? Mine goes from 16 to 21 when I get tired and I can't figure out why. We're sort of talking about that, but what are some other ideas on why it may be that variable, 16 to 21? That's a pretty big change.
Well, globally, what's happening is you're either encountering more resistance, so your body position is changing, or your arms are slipping through the water to where you're not grabbing a hold of that water. The palm isn't flat, that's maybe curved, you're not using your forearm as well, or a combination of both of those.
Can I add one other? And I think it's important is that if you become out of breath, right? Like you're feeling hypoxic, you may speed up your stroke so you can breathe more. And then, well, in concert with what Rick was saying,
there's a hierarchy of needs.
Exactly.
If you can't breathe. You're not too worried about your stroke.
Yeah, no, and it's important, but I think it's true, right? And I think they go hand in hand. Is like, so you're going to speed up your stroke to breathe more, and then maybe you're going to tilt your hand slightly so there's less resistance, so it can actually go through faster. So you can get that next breath. Because you're right, there is a hierarchy of needs, and oxygen is like number one, or off-putting, let's get technical.
Absolutely.
Off-putting CO2 is more important.
All right, so we're almost to the end here. I want to switch gears just a little bit, Rick, and I want you to tell us what was your favorite swim course to do in any race.
Oh, it had to be Louisville.
Oh, really?
If it rained,
you gotta be kidding me.
If it rained 2 weeks before Louisville upstream, I had my best time in Louisville. I had a 55 for the 2.4 mile swim in Louisville. And, they had you swim, maybe a 25% or a third of the course upstream. And then and it was near the shore. And then you went out into more towards the middle of the river. You went around the buoy, and then you went downstream. We went downstream real fast.
Oh, I love it. So just so a lot of people may not know that course, that's the Ohio River. And you put your hand in the water. I mean, you can't you can't see 6 inches in front of you. It's a pretty murky
That
water.
is true.
And it's one of the first races that was doing a rolling start just because of the logistics of the start. And so they've always done
They
a
had to.
rolling start for that. And so you jump off the dock
Yeah.
and like you said, you go upstream.
Yeah.
So, but did you enjoy it because of the current, or was it, what part of that was enjoyable?
Well, there were a whole bunch of things. That was my second Ironman. My first Ironman, I was in Wisconsin. It was a rainy day. It never got to 60 degrees.
Yeah.
And I went on a downhill pretty fast. I touched my brakes. The tire started going all over the place in the back. I crashed. I broke 6 ribs. Had a lacerated liver and a pneumothorax. And that was about 30 miles into the bike. And I only found that out after I finished about, just under 15 hours. So,
Wow.
but my second race was I said, I lived in Wisconsin at the time. And I said, there's no way I'm going back to Wisconsin. I'd face the same thing next year.
Mhm.
And Louisville was, the inaugural Louisville race was coming up. And Nancy's brother lives there. My brother-in-law lives there. So we went down there, and it was about a 9-hour drive from where we were.
Mm.
And I raced down there. And one of the cool things was, and he probably got in trouble for this because I never saw him do it again, was one of the Ironman champions, who's a big guy in Ironman. And if you said the name, I'd know who it was. It's an Aussie. Anyway, as we're filing down onto the dock, he's shaking everybody's hand. Okay. And here's me. My best Ironman is like 14:53 or something, and he's shaking my hand, wishing me luck. I thought that was a class move.
That's great.
I think that Ironman said, "Don't ever do that again. You're slowing people up." But but that was, and I told him that when I've been in Kona that happened to me, and I thought that was a really class move. But
That's great. That's great. All right. So that's interesting. You didn't say Kona is your favorite swim, but there seems like a real nice connection with the Louisville.
I like the bike better than I like the swim. I'm good at the swim, but it's just, I've been in some situations. I had a guy crawl over me in Kona. I had a guy start to crawl over me, and I flipped on my back, put my foot on his shoulder and pushed him back. And he popped up, and I said, "Stay back there or go around." And he later went around, but he was very cautious about doing it. But I didn't, and I don't encourage anybody to do that. I just, and I didn't even think about it. I just did it. Just the pressure of the day, I guess. But
and because everyone at Kona is fast, and so you're in that same group of swim. It's just a bigger group of.
And they swim straight.
Yeah.
You never have to look where you're going. Wherever the group is going, that's where you should be going, right. And the only reason you look is to see how much farther have I got.
Yeah.
Because they're all, because they all swim straight,
Yeah. All right. I love it. So I don't like to think negatively, but which swim course did you not enjoy?
Let's see here. I've done, this one's easy. Arizona, because it was so cold. Cold and I have a very antagonistic relationship. And it was just, I had a good swim, but it was just so cold. And it was cold all day and it rained all day. It was one of those disaster days for me,
Yeah. Last couple of years.
But yeah, I would, but it was only because of the cold. I thought Arizona was very well run. I just had some bad weather,
All All right.
raining all day in the desert in Arizona. That's just not something that happens. But
Yeah,
it did.
yeah. I love it. Okay, last question I have. Do you put your goggle strap under your cap or over your cap?
Under my cap. I would much rather lose my cap than my goggles. I have lost my cap. I lost it when in Kona, but
All right, Ted,
you
you
know,
gotta
I'm
change.
gonna
under
change.
my cap.
This is it. It's two against one. So I will officially, my next race, I will put my goggle straps under my cap. It is official.
Okay, here's another one. This is another one though, Ted. Wear two caps.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
Put the
cold.
goggles in
Always wear two caps when it's cold. And it's
Well,
but
you know, that's what the Olympic swimmers all do. They're all wearing two caps.
Yeah.
And the goggle straps are in between so that there's no
they're not going to move at all.
Yeah.
well, A, the goggles aren't going to move at all, and B, they're swimming so fast, especially 100 and 200 meter events, that they don't want anything sticking out in any small amount to cause any amount of resistance.
Yep.
And with those two caps, they can get that top cap so that it's smooth all the way. There are no wrinkles.
Yep.
So,
You know, I'm
yeah,
so glad you mentioned that, because
two caps.
that's something I've thought of before, was like the hydrodynamics of these caps you just get at a race, and they don't fit right, and they're
Yeah.
you know, and there is a lot of wrinkles around the top, and we should really be thinking about that, like getting it as smooth as possible.
That's right.
So for guys like Jan and guys like, you know, Lucy Charles and, you know, Daniela Riff and Tim O'Donnell, which, by the way, Tim O'Donnell is going back to, he's going to start racing again.
That's good.
But, you know, for those guys who are swimming really fast, you know, Andy Potts, yeah, that's probably something to think about. But for us, not so much.
Hey, if I can get out of the swim 10 seconds
quicker,
still 10 seconds quicker.
Yeah.
You know, I went 109, let's just say 110 at Coeur d'Alene. And, you know, the fastest swimmer was, you know, I think under 50 minutes. So they had a 20-minute lead.
Yeah.
And I'm not a bad swimmer.
Yeah. Right.
You know? So, yeah, I'm not sure how much difference it would make for us, Ted.
Okay. Well, because then the other theory is like just get a bunch of air in there to be more buoyant, but then it's out of the water, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, I have tales to tell you about air. Back in I think it was the Munich Olympics, way back. Okay, there was a team, one of the national teams, that actually pumped air into the bowels in order to get them up higher in the water and give them an advantage.
And, I can see people doing that.
But what happened was it gave them so much cramps, and you know, and it made them so uncomfortable, and none of them felt like they had gotten an advantage from it. But it was discovered like after the games, and they got like the national whatever organization got reprimanded for that. But you know, and that's all that, you know, that was before, you know, people realized how much cheating was really going on.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, this is not an anomaly. You know, the United States, what was it, the distance team time trial in 1984, they were putting suppositories of caffeine, you know, for the races. I mean, people have been trying to do stuff down there for a long time. So.
It's yeah.
All right. Well, we have covered a lot of ground, from suppository to training technique to recovery. But this has been really entertaining and informative. And Rick, this has been great to have you on. Like we started, you've got a wealth of experience and knowledge, and it's really great that you're willing to share that. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is great.
Let me say one more thing. I swim Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I try to be at the multi-gen pool at 9:30. There's one other person who had been coming to swim with me. She's been unable to over the holidays and that, but she's going to start again on Monday, I think. Anybody who wants to join us, that's, and especially, and Wednesday is usually the day that I'm really and Thursday, I got plenty of buddies, stuck in that. No water a lot longer than they, so, I got a lot of time.
That's
So
great. Well,
anybody who wants to do it,
yeah, and people have commented how you have helped them. So again, you're very generous, not with only with your time here, but helping
well,
them. So thank you.
I try. I don't know. I don't know. I often feel like, geez, I wish I could help them more, but I just,
Yeah.
but I have difficulty, and some of that is strength, and some of that is balance to where the muscles are the right motion. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's at this point in my life, I'm not worried about a 35-year-old competing with me or anything like that.
Yep.
So I'm happy to share knowledge.
That's great. Rick, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great evening.
You too.